is Kira. Welcome back to Not Too Cool to Read. We will be finishing 15. We are starting at chapter 6. Brooke. I couldn't believe how well everything was going, better than I could have imagined. It was all I could do not to keep from doubling over with laughter every time I saw Courtney or Ashley. Poor, pitiful Courtney. She stuck around with this crushed, sad expression. She looked as if she'd lost her best friend, which she'd had, and of course I knew exactly how terrible she felt. Day after day, she poured her heart into her diary, and every day I went to her locker, read the diary, and then put it back. There were a few close calls. Twice I was at Courtney's locker just as she was coming over. But I got out of there in time. I started playing Get Safe and going to her locker after homeroom or first period when I knew she would be in class. The idiot never suspected anything. I must admit, the fun wore off a bit as time went on. Courtney got into kind of a rut, writing on and on about how bad she felt about her fight with Ashley. It got quite boring, actually, but then there was Ashley. She was keeping things pretty interesting. I knew Courtney's words had bothered her, and I was counting on it causing trouble between Ashley and Courtney, but I never dreamed Ashley would take things so far. Obviously, she was determined to stamp out every trace of Little Miss Perfect. The day I saw Ashley in the Avalon during school hours, I could hardly believe my eyes. And with Dylan, okay, I was cutting class too, but just study hall. It's not a major biggie. Besides, it was the last class of the day, so I just cut out a little early. But it was pretty clear that Ashley and Dylan had been there a while. Their table was loaded with plates and glasses. Dylan got up to play a song on the jukebox. I joined him. Have you been a naughty boy today, Dylan? I teased. Dylan looked at me with those dark, brooding eyes. There's always been this attraction between Dylan and me. He's not the kind of guy I want to hook up with. He's not going anywhere in life, and I'm not straddling myself with any loser type, but I get this kind of shivery feeling when he's around. It's the same for him. I know he thinks I'm too uptown, but he can't help being attracted to me. I can see it in the way he looks at me. It depends what you mean by naughty, he laughed as he punched in some songs. Well, for starters, I see you've been cutting class with Matt's girlfriend. I said, Matt's ex-girlfriend. He corrected me. My, that's news. I looked over at Ashley, who sat with her legs kicked up onto the seat, absolutely shredding a straw wrapper. She wore skin-tight pants and boots. I don't think Ashley is your type, I pointed out to Dylan. Ashley's changing. So I see, I murmured, and you're like, here to help her along. Dylan leaned against the jukebox and folded his arms. I'm showing Ashley a different side of things, he answered. We're having some fun. We went swimming up by the reservoir. Just the two of you? I asked sweetly. Who else should have been there? Dylan answered sharply. Excuse me, I said, pretending to be offended. I simply wanted to know exactly how much fun you and Ashley are having. Dylan smiled mysteriously. We're having a ton of fun, he said as he walked back to Ashley. Then another song came on the jukebox. Dylan dragged Ashley from the booth and they began to dance. Dylan is a great dancer considering how tall he is. He moves really well. He lets the beat take him, throwing his shoulders forward, jerking his head. But poor pathetic Ashley. At first, she just kind of stood there, looking embarrassed. Then Courtney and Jake walked in. I glanced at my watch and saw that it was past 3. Now that school was out, kids were pouring in. Ellen, the waitress, came out from behind the counter. She wasn't smiling. There's no dancing allowed at the Avalon. Ashley must have spotted Ellen, but she didn't sit down. Instead, she looked over at Courtney, turned her back, and really started to move. I looked toward Courtney and Jake. Jake just scowled. Courtney stood there, frozen. Then Ashley, spinning into Dylan's arms, kissed him on the lips. We're talking major passionate kiss. Courtney looked like she was about to faint. Ashley was making a fool of herself. It was great. Courtney, dear diary, I wrote during study hall. This last week has been the worst in my life. That's putting it mildly. First, Ashley and I have this hideous fight. Then she accuses me of stealing her boyfriend, which isn't true. And yesterday I discovered something going on between Ashley and Dylan. Mom and Dad are still fighting over whether or not Billy should keep living with Dad. Last night, Billy and Dad came over. My parents had a terrible screaming match. In the middle of it, Billy covered his ears and stormed out of the house. And ever since Ashley's fat crack, I've been trying to diet. That hasn't been easy either. But the worst part is that except for you, Diary, I have no one to talk to about this. And no offense, but right now, I would like to talk to someone who talks back. I suppose I could talk to Jake, but the truth is, I really want to talk to Ashley. I would, that is, if she wasn't so mad at me. And now I'm mad at her too. She knows how I feel about Dylan. I shut my diary. Writing wasn't making me feel better. In fact, it was getting me more upset. The more I thought about everything that had happened, the worse I felt. Closing my eyes, I replayed the scene in the Avalon. I'd replayed it 100 times since yesterday. Ashley kissing Dylan, Dylan holding Ashley in his arms and kissing her back. I couldn't get the image out of my head. It was torture. When I saw them kiss, I turned and left. I just couldn't deal with it. It hurt so much. Before this, I'd felt guilty about what I'd said to Matt about Ashley. Then I began to worry about Ashley. Why was she acting so weird? Now I was also angry and jealous. Ashley had Dylan, the only boy I'd ever really liked, the boy Ashley told me not to bother with. When I remember how she talked Dylan down, I became more furious. Had she been interested in him all along, Ashley was all wrong for Dylan. She was encouraging him to be wild, only using him to get her bad girl kicks. Dylan needed someone to bring out his better side, his intelligence and sensitivity. Somewhere along the line, someone must have hurt Dylan really bad. I'm sure that's why he acts so tough and who cares on the outside. It's because he's so soft and cares so much on the inside. He thinks he has to hide all that. Ashley doesn't see any of that about him, and Dylan was wrong for Ashley too. He was encouraging her to go further and further out on a limb. She was cutting school with him a lot. Sometimes they sneak out at lunchtime and never come back. Other times, they didn't show up at all. No one expects to see Dylan all the time, but Ashley almost never missed school before. And I heard from a junior that they were thinking of kicking Ashley off the student council because she was missing so many meetings. Ashley had campaigned really hard to be elected. I couldn't believe she was throwing it all away. I knew it was because of Dylan. He was telling her not to care. He was dragging her into his Who Cares Act. I opened my English notebook and pulled out a blank piece of paper. A poem had suddenly popped into my head. That's how it always happens with me. Poof, and there it is, as if someone else had thought it up. Wild ways, crazy days, what's it all about? Breaking free for all to see with a rebel shout. But I see you true, I know the real you, standing tough against the tide, a mix of strong emotion, passion, hurt, and pride. And in the night, I hear your heart, beating pure and strong. I feel its pulse burn through mine like a siren song. I crossed out the word siren and changed it to mermaid. A mermaid song. No, that sounded too twerpy. I put siren back. A siren was a dangerous mermaid who lured sailors to their deaths, steering them into the rocks with bewitchingly beautiful songs. In a way, Dylan was like a siren. It was his music that made me fall in love with him. And now I sure felt stranded on the rocks too. Folding the paper, I slipped it back into my notebook. Then I had an idea. I had written some lyrics for Dylan once before. He said he liked them a lot. I know he meant it because he wrote music to them right away. He'd even kissed me once. While we were in his garage working on the songs, he kissed me, then he left. We never talked about it, and it never happened again, but it did happen. Something about working on the songs together had made us feel very close. My idea was to give this poem to Dylan, telling him it was a lyric for his music. It would make a good song, but that wasn't really why I wanted him to read the poem. I wanted him to know how I felt. He'd have to realize the poem was about him. It was pretty obvious. I went to his locker and slipped the poem in. I'd added a note at the bottom that said, I thought this might make a good song. Let me know what you think. Courtney. For the rest of the afternoon, I was on pins and needles. Every time I turned a corner, half of me prayed Dylan would be there. The other half sighed with relief each time he wasn't. I pictured my next meeting with Dylan 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways. All of them were romantic. Dylan might be Ashley's now, but when he read my song, he'd realized he belonged with me. As the day went on, I became more and more sure of it. It was almost last period when I saw my brother Billy in the hall. "Hey, Courtney," he called. He called to me. "Dylan wants to throw a small concert in his garage today. He plays drums. Billy plays drums in Dylan's band. He's been friends with Dylan even before I was. Dylan says the band could use some practice in front of a real audience." Billy continued. "He told me to invite you." My heart banged in my chest. He told you to ask me?" I questioned Billy urgently. "I mean, me specifically." "Yeah," said Billy, looking at me as if I were insane. "He didn't just say, 'Go ask some kids.' He said, 'Go ask Courtney.' He's asking some other kids too," Billy told me. But he said to me, 'Ask Courtney if she can come.' What's the big deal?" I was so happy. I hugged Billy. This is great," I said. "So great." Billy pulled away. "This is just Dylan and the band. It's not REM or anybody." "I couldn't be happier if it were," I told him honestly. Dylan had asked to see me. That afternoon, I took everything I owned out of the closet and piled it on my bed. I had to wear the perfect thing. Nothing I owned was good enough. And then, as if it were absolutely meant to be, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery of an outfit I'd ordered from a catalog. Mom had said I could order it for my birthday last month, but it had taken so long to come that I'd almost forgotten about it. I ripped open the package. There it was, pressed and new and perfect. I put on the lightweight blue turtleneck. The sleeves were full and the neck draped in soft folds. Then I put on the long flowered skirt. It was a lot fancier than what I usually wear. It was made of 2 layers of slightly sheer material and had a zigzag handkerchief hemline. Under the skirt, I wore tights and my best tan suede boots. I tried wearing my hair every way imaginable. Finally, I decided to sweep it all up to the top of my head in a loose bun. After adding my long, dangly, silvery earrings, I was extremely pleased with the look, except for one thing. I wondered if the outfit made me look fat. Ashley's remark had really gotten to me. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. Fat, fat, fat. The word kept creeping into my head. Now every time I looked at myself with a sigh, I pulled the turtleneck top out of the skirt waistband and let it hang over the skirt. There, that looked better, I decided. At 4, I ran down the block to Dylan's garage. Before I was even up the driveway, I could hear the band tuning up. Ahead of me, I saw Brooke. That girl always manages to wheedle an invitation to whatever is going on. Brooke's younger sister, Amanda, was also heading in along with Erin, Matt's younger sister. "Hey, you look great," said Arsman, coming up behind me. "Thanks," I replied. "How did you hear about this?" "Dylan and I are lab partners." "You mean Dylan actually shows up at lab?" I questioned lightly. "Occasionally. Most of the time he shows up at my locker to ask what we did in lab." Arsman laughed. "But today he was there and he invited me and a few other kids to this concert." "A few" was putting it mildly. It looked to me as if Dylan had invited everyone on earth. I felt kind of let down about that at first. Then I realized what must have happened. Most of the kids probably heard about the concert and invited themselves, but Dylan had asked to see me. Arsman and I entered the garage together. I waved to Billy, who was sitting behind his drum set. The garage was pretty full of kids, all sitting on crates, old furniture, beach chairs, or wherever they could. It was exciting. It made me think of what it must have been like for people who saw the Rolling Stones before they became rock legends. The minute Dylan saw me, he came right over. "You're really talented," he said to me. When I read the lyrics, I couldn't believe how good they were. "And it was like you read my mind. I have this music I've written, and I've been beating my brains out trying to write words for it. Your words plugged in perfectly. I'm going to try it out today." "We make a good team. Words and music." Just then, Chris, the lead guitarist, called Dylan back to the stage area. "I'll talk to you later," he said as he turned away. Then he turned back quickly. "By the way, you look real nice today," he added. "Thanks," I said, blushing a little. The band opened with two original songs that had a strong dance beat. Everyone loved them. Then the band quieted down. "This is a brand new song I'd like to try out on you all today," Dylan told the audience. He changed from electric guitar to acoustic. The band went off to the side and Dylan stood alone before the microphone. The music he put to my words was truly beautiful. It brought tears to my eyes, and he sang it with such meaning. I felt like he was singing my words back to me, but slowly I realized something. He wasn't exactly looking at me as he sang. He was sort of gazing past my shoulder. I turned, following Dylan's gaze, to the back of the garage. Suddenly, I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. There she stood, her hair mussed, her eyes lined black, in a short, tight black dress and high heels. Dylan wasn't singing my words to me at all. He was singing them to Ashley. Brooke. When I saw Courtney run out of Dylan's concert, I followed. I could tell she was upset. I needed to find out exactly what had happened, and I didn't want to wait for tomorrow's diary entry. "Are you all right?" I asked, catching up to Courtney at the end of the driveway. Courtney turned away from me, but from the choked sound of her voice, I knew she was crying. "I'm fine," she said as she hurried down the block. "Wait!" I called. I caught up with her and held her arm. "You're not all right." Courtney turned a puffy, tear-stained face to me. Boy, was she ever upset. "Please leave me alone," she pleaded. "I know we aren't friends," I said, "but I really feel bad seeing you like this," which was almost true. She looked so pathetic. Courtney reeled around to face me. "Not friends." She spit out the words. "That's a laugh. You're the one responsible for getting Ashley mad at me. You told her what I said to Matt." "You have it all wrong," I told her. "All I said to Ashley was that you admired her and thought of her as being perfect in every way." "Why would you say that?" Courtney asked doubtfully. Because she was saying she thought you were after Matt. I was defending you." "But you told Ashley I was meeting Matt at the Avalon. How did you even know that?" It was time for the puppy dog eyes again. "Ashley misunderstood. I told her that I seen you and Matt together at the Avalon a couple of nights ago, and that it all looked perfectly innocent to me. She got crazy over it and thought you guys were meeting there all the time. It was just bad luck that when she checked, there you were." I heard it was a pretty ugly scene. It was, Courtney admitted. Courtney was still suspicious and kept walking toward her house, but I could tell that she was no longer sure what to think. Maybe I was telling the truth, maybe I wasn't. She was confused. I didn't give up though. I walked alongside, handing her tissues and looking genuinely sympathetic, and I could tell she was dying to talk to someone, anyone, even me. We were almost to her house when the dam burst. She broke down crying again and sobbed out the whole story. Of course, I already knew most of it, but Courtney didn't know that. Naturally, I hadn't known the part about the song. I cringed when Courtney tearfully blurted it out. Ouch. That was a low blow. I couldn't believe Dylan hadn't realized the words were meant for him. Boys are about as sensitive as rocks sometimes. Dylan's thick-headedness had worked in my favor though. Courtney was now completely devastated. Here was the opening I'd been looking for. This was my chance to really get things going. "You overlooked something very important, you know," I pointed out as we sat on her front steps. "What's that?" "Matt is now available." "So?" For a supposedly bright girl, Courtney wasn't too swift on the uptake. "Don't you like Matt? He's Ashley's boyfriend," Courtney insisted densely. "Not anymore." Courtney studied me with her teary eyes. "They'll get back together again, don't you think so?" I shook my head. "It looks to me like Ashley and Dylan are getting tighter by the day. Some girl is bound to snap Matt up. It might as well be you." "Matt thinks of me as a friend," Courtney said as she wiped her eyes. "I mean, he's cute and all, but—" "I knew it," I cut her off. "You do like him." "He is really nice," she admitted, smiling slightly. Courtney was so upset and vulnerable right then that I had the teeniest twinge of guilt. But I had to keep going, working on getting her to trust me. This was an unbelievable opportunity to get to Courtney, and it might never come again. Right now, I didn't stand a chance with Matt. He was still too hung up on Ashley, and he was on his guard with me. But he liked Courtney. He trusted her. She might be able to get next to him as a friend and then turn into something more. If Courtney could take Ashley's place, Ashley and Matt would never get back together. Then once he was really over Ashley, it would be easy enough to blow Courtney out of the water. Then I'd have Matt back. And even if I never got Matt back, at least Ashley wouldn't have him either. She'd break up with Dylan sooner or later, or he'd dump her. It was only a matter of time. When that happened, Ashley would wake up and realize she'd lost her best friend and her boyfriend, but it would be too late. Either way, I couldn't lose. Stop being a wimp, I told Courtney sternly. Do you want a shot at Matt or not? It would serve Ashley right, Courtney grumbled, but Matt isn't interested in me. Maybe not the way you are. I said, you're much too artistic looking for a jock like Matt. I was being kind. I don't know where the girl comes up with her outfits. Today, admittedly, she looked better than usual, but most days, she's a horror show. Those long skirts and dumpy blouses, not a drop of makeup, and the drippiest non-hairdo you can imagine. I sometimes wondered if she owned a mirror. Boys like Matt prefer girls with a little more style. I said, I could help you with that. I'm good with clothes and makeup. It wouldn't take much. Do you really think it could work? Courtney asked doubtfully. Sure, face it, Dylan is taken. Isn't Matt your second choice? It is fair to go out with someone who's only your second choice? Courtney asked. I should have expected a question like that from Miss Philosophical Fairschmer, I scoffed. Is what Ashley did to you fair? And Matt is a good guy. You really do like him. You're right, Courtney agreed. When do you want to start the makeover? I stood and brushed off my skirt. How about right this very minute? Courtney, life can be very strange, I thought as I sat on my bed. Brooke was standing in my closet sorting through my clothing. Brooke! And my personal things. I never had expected to be hanging around with Brooke. I couldn't think of anyone less likely to ever step foot in my house. But Brooke was being nice, and I needed a friend at that moment. I had to think about everything she said. Maybe I'd misjudged her. And here's a secret. Though I'd never liked Brooke, deep down, there was always a tiny, grudging part of me that admired her. I envied her smoothness and confidence. She had a style and presence that I could never have, or maybe I could, with Brooke's help. Ashley wasn't the only one who could change her image. At least, it was something to think about. Besides Dylan and Ashley, I felt like a total fool. What a jerk I'd been to think Dylan would be moved by my poem. All it made him do was think of Ashley. Brooke threw 2 blouses on my bed. These 2 are all right. The clothes you have on now are pretty good too. The rest of your stuff should be burned, she said. Now, let's look at your hair. Come here. I joined her over by my long bedroom mirror. Brooke stepped back and studied me. You need a new hairstyle, she told me. But I just got my hair cut last week, I said, and it was really expensive. I don't have the money to get another one. Then how about a French braid? Brooke suggested, pulling the pins out of my bun. You don't like the bun? I asked. I thought it looked great. It's okay if you want to look like you're from another century, Brooke replied as she brushed out my hair. Well, your hair in the braid. We'll put your hair in the braid until you can persuade your parents to pay for another haircut. The braid looked pretty. Next, Brooke used her makeup to do my face. She applied it expertly. The makeup wasn't too heavy, but I did look much more glamorous. After that was done, Brooke went back to her closet. As I said, the outfit you have on is at least passable, but I don't think it's Matt's style, she said. Can you get some new stuff? I'm broke, remember? And I don't think my mother would be thrilled if I asked her for a lot of new clothes right now. I replied, shaking my head. Okay, we'll have to make do. Brooke sighed as she pulled a long skirt from my closet. Get some scissors, she told me. We're going to show Matt that you do have a pair of legs. Are your legs any good? I don't know, I said, sorting through my top desk drawer for scissors. Some people might think they're a little fat. I was remembering what Ashley had said. I handed Brooke the scissors. She began chopping at the skirt without even asking me. Hem this tonight, she said, holding the skirt up to my waist. Hem as many of these ratty old skirts as you can, or better yet, get some money and buy new short ones. Brooke spent another half hour with me reworking my image. For heaven's sake, stand up straight, she scolded me, shoulders back. You don't want Matt to think you're a hunchback. I took a deep breath and stuck out my chest. I felt ridiculous. It's just not me, I sighed as I let out my breath. Of course it is, said Brooke. Besides, you look much slimmer when you stand correctly. It's all a matter of attitude. I'm great. Tell yourself that over and over. Soon it will start to show, and when it shows, everyone else will believe it too. Brooke dug a fashion magazine out of her large purse. So this, she said, tossing it on my bed. I'll see you in school tomorrow. We'll work on Project Matt some more then. Bye, Brooke, and thanks a lot, I said. I'm great, I whispered to my image in the mirror after Brooke had left. I'm great, I said louder. Then I flopped back on my bed. I didn't feel great. I felt hopeless. I rolled onto my stomach and thumped through the magazine. The models were all so perky and pretty and so thin. Scooting off the bed, I headed toward the mirror. Then I lifted my skirt and studied my legs. Did I have good legs? You have fat thighs, I scolded myself. I dropped my skirt and put my hands on my waist. It was definitely too thick. My attempt at dieting was a miserable failure. I kept hearing Ashley's voice telling me, you're getting fat, you're getting fat. Before that day, Ashley always told me I looked fine, but maybe she hadn't thought that at all. She was probably just being nice. That was like Ashley, the old Ashley. The new Ashley didn't bother to be nice. She said exactly what she thought, and she thought I was fat. Fat had been on my mind ever since, and now Brooke had commented on it too. You look much slimmer when you hold yourself correctly, she said. Was that her way of saying I still needed to lose weight? Probably. Serious diet time, I told myself. I never really dieted before. I'd always been a skinny kid, but apparently the time had come. I recalled hearing about a crash diet when you eat nothing but grapefruit and bacon. A girl in school had told me about it. I liked grapefruit and bacon. It didn't sound too terrible. Besides, it wouldn't be forever. I decided to do it. That night, I skipped dinner altogether. I told my mother I didn't feel well. That was pretty much true. After everything that happened, I'd had absolutely no appetite. To make matters worse, Billy came bouncing in all excited about the concert. Everybody loved your song. That's just great, I said, rushing from the living room. I thought I was all cried out. I wasn't. After I dried my eyes, I took out the skirt Brooke had cut and began hemming it. There was no sense sitting around feeling sorry for myself. It was time to take action. The next morning, I cooked up some bacon and had it with grapefruit. That afternoon, I went out to our local diner for lunch and had the same. Brooke came with me. She thought the diet was a terrific idea. That short skirt looks adorable, she told me, inspecting the skirt I'd hem. But you're right, the thighs are a little pudgy. If I'd had any doubts about the diet, Brooke's pudgy comment swept them away. I did need to diet, and it was a good thing I was doing it right now before I got huge. It was pretty tough eating a grapefruit while she bit into a big, juicy hamburger, but I was determined to lose weight. All through lunch, she gave me pointers on how to make Matt like me. He likes a girl who listens, so keep your mouth shut, she advised. No matter what he says, act like it's the most awesome thing you've ever heard. This sure didn't sound like Matt, the Matt I knew, but Brooke had dated him. I suppose she knew whatever she was talking about. That evening, Mom argued with me about having nothing but grapefruit and bacon for supper. I lied and said my stomach still wasn't right, and those were the only things that appealed to me. Honestly, though, I was starving. The next morning, I had the same old thing. Not only was I hungry, but my mood was worse than ever. I spotted Ashley and Dylan in the hall, and I wanted to leap out and strangle them both. I couldn't remember ever being so angry. Maybe the diet was affecting the way I felt. At lunchtime that day, Matt came hurrying to my locker. He seemed all excited about something. I hadn't seen him in a couple of days. This was my chance to show off the new me. Forcing myself to stand up straight, I tried to smile as brightly as possible. "Hi, Matt. Courtney, I have to talk to you," he said. "It's real important." "Sure." Suddenly I felt super dizzy. A large black spot appeared from nowhere and kind of danced in front of my eyes. "What's wrong?" I heard Matt say, but his voice sounded very far away, and then everything went black. The next thing I knew, I opened my eyes and Matt was staring down into my face. "Courtney, you fainted." "How do you feel?" Slowly I sat up. My head was spinning. A crowd of kids stood behind Matt. "Not so good," I said honestly. "Come on," Matt said, helping me to my feet. "I'm taking you to the nurse's office." The minute I stood, I was lightheaded again. I fell heavily into Matt. "Steady," he said. "Keep your arm around me, and I'll get you there." Even though I felt awful, it was nice being so close to Matt. He's really strong and muscular. "Has this happened before?" he asked me. "No," I said. I was too embarrassed to tell him about the diet. I was even more embarrassed when my stomach growled so loud we could both hear it. Matt gave me a searching look, but was too polite to say anything. The nurse, Miss Myers, wasn't as polite. "What did you have for breakfast?" she asked immediately, as Matt settled me down on the cot in the back room. I couldn't lie. There was something about her no-nonsense tone that made me tell the truth. "Grapefruit and bacon. And for supper last night, grapefruit and bacon. And for lunch before that, grapefruit and bacon." "Let me guess," she said. "You had grapefruit and bacon for breakfast that day, too." I nodded. Miss Myers sighed angrily. "You girls and your crazy diets. I'd like to shake some sense into the bunch of you. Look at you. You no more need to be on a diet than the man in the moon." She sent Matt to the cafeteria to buy me an egg salad sandwich on a roll and a carton of milk. When he returned, she ordered me to sit on the cot and eat it. "And you make sure she eats every bite," she ordered Matt as she went back out to the front room. "Why are you starving yourself like that?" Matt asked. As I bit into the sandwich, it tasted so good. "I wanted to lose weight," I replied. Matt shook his head in bewilderment. "Don't you go loopy on me, too," he said. "It's bad enough that Ashley has lost her mind. I don't know what's gotten into her." "I don't understand it either," I said between bites. "I mean, I know she's mad about finding me and you together, but why should that make her act so strange? Could it be that dumb thing I said about her being perfect?" Matt's face grew very serious. "It might be more than that. This is what I was coming over to tell you." He looked at me and hesitated. "What?" "I don't want you to faint again." "I won't. Tell me." "All right," he said. "I was coming down the hall this morning, and I was late for class. I saw Brooke in the hall." "So? She's late for class all the time." "No, you don't get it," he continued. "She was at your locker. I saw her open it. Did you give her your combination?" "I would never," I gasped. "I didn't think so." "She took a notebook from your locker, and she was very interested about reading it. I can't picture Brooke being that revved up about reading your biology notes, so I wondered if you knew what it was." I was so stunned that my sandwich fell from my hand. "My diary!" I cried. "She's been reading my diary. That explains everything. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff in there about how I think Ashley needs to loosen up. I even said she was so perfect it made me sick." "Oh no," Matt groaned. "I had a feeling it was something personal like that. She probably showed it to Ashley. She must have. What a complete idiot I've been to trust Brooke for even 2 minutes. How could I have been so stupid? I wrote that I'd be meeting you at the Avalon. That's how Ashley knew. We talked about Ashley and how she must be feeling. Now I was sure I knew why she was acting so strange. She was trying to prove she wasn't Little Miss Perfect. But who was she trying to prove it to? Me, Matt, herself? As we talked, I knew something else for certain. There would never be anything between me and Matt besides friendship. That's what we truly felt for one another. When Matt talked about Ashley, his eyes were soft with sadness and concern. He was so unhappy that they'd broken up and so worried about Ashley. I could see how much he loved her and how mad he was at Brooke for coming between them. Wait till I get my hands on Brooke, Matt growled, strangling the air as if she were right there. I have a better idea, I said. I just thought of a way we can get Brooke. And good. How? Matt asked eagerly. I smiled. My Brooke lessons had paid off. I'd come up with a plan that Brooke would have been proud of, except, of course, for the fact that Brooke was the target. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye.